Without further ado, I want to introduce to you Jeremy Coons, who is our moderator for the session. He is the Senior Manager for the Professional Services Division at Access Data, in which he is responsible for the Northeast, Canadian, and Federal divisions. Prior to joining Access Data, Mr. Coons was a senior consultant with FTA Consulting and an investigator with the Kroll High Technology Crimes Division and Business Intelligence and Investigation Division. Mr. Coons holds a BS in Computer Information Systems from King's College, so please join me in welcoming Jeremy.
Morning, everyone. So on the panel this morning, we have Mr. Kevin Green. He is the Software Assurance Program Manager for Science and Technology at the Department of Homeland Security. We have Colleen Coggins, the CIO of NHTSA and works with transportation, and Mr. Craig McComb, the CIO, who's in charge of ASC Lifecycle Management Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with the United States Air Force. So please join me in welcoming them to the panel. So we absolutely want this to be an interactive discussion. So please, if there's any questions out there as they come up, please feel free to raise your hand, and we can, we certainly want to make this more of a discussion than a simple kind of us just dictating where this conversation goes. So with that said, I'll start with Mr. Craig McComb. So Mr. McComb, what types of technologies or approaches are you leveraging that may help increase efficiencies and reduce labor-intensive activities in your work?
First of all, good morning, everyone. We're all hit with budget reductions right now, which I think is causing a lot of stress on everyone. But a few years ago, I had my technology team focus more on business process automation and metrics management dashboard production for the center. And what this has done, and we started out with a civil engineering legacy application and converted it over to SharePoint using some Java scripts and encapsulate those scripts as reusable objects. And the whole point here was to get out of the manual intervention of having to do civil engineering contracts and passing documents and requirements, specifications back and forth, and then invoicing and inspection documents to complete a job and put them through SharePoint, which allows a little more immediate return. And we can quantify the efficiency gains out of that and actually increase effectiveness with less manual handling of data and more immediate return on allowing the civil engineers and the contractors who are doing the construction work to focus on the work and not have to focus on all the data input and all the document management they had to do. And by using that, we created kind of a foundation of a reusable concept. We have more clients right now in queue than we can produce results for, but we've had great success, not only in the process automation side with cost avoidance, but also the production of metrics management dashboards that allow senior leaders and program managers to have a baseline of certain key processes right now, how long they take, and try to derive more efficiency out of that. And using my internal team, and we do count the cost of their labor, but we've had cost avoidances recently, $200,000 for headquarters AFMC, that they would have gone to a private sector firm, a contractor, to produce the same capability we do. And we use standard Air Force technologies. We're not introducing anything new into the environment. So we're not going out saying we need more tools. We'd like to have more state-of-the-art tools. We don't have them. But whatever the Air Force purveys out, our team tries to bend and use it.
Colleen, are there some technologies or approaches that you're using in your day-to-day that are that you may be leveraging to increase efficiencies?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. So are there technologies and approaches that you're using in your day-to-day that may help increase efficiencies and reduce labor-intensive activities?
Yes, well, since this is the focus of this session is a cybersecurity information assurance, let me give the contextual answer to that in that realm. Within NHTSA, we have a pretty sophisticated, mature governance process, and we also have a pretty detailed tracking system where we look at each of our IT investments and all of the application systems that make up that investment. And we constantly monitor them, of course, under continuous monitoring in terms of all of the security controls in play. But the results of those security controls, the financial aspects for implementing those security controls, and we mine that data pretty readily to see where we can have cost efficiencies in more of a shared environment, if you will. So a lot of the things that we're looking at are, of course, making sure that all of our data is secure based on the sensitivity of the information, but where we can layer our controls across our environment and do that in a repeated fashion.
Thank you. Mr. Green, what type of technologies and approaches are you leveraging that may help increase efficiencies?
Well, in terms of my role, first of all, good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone is enjoying this session. In terms of my role at DHS, we're, as I mentioned, we're not an operational component. So one of our roles is to establish ourselves as leaders in the space of trying to provide innovation to not only the federal government, but to private industry as well. As we look at the executive order that was issued by the President of the United States and the policy directives as well, one of the things that has been set forth is, a call for a more comprehensive R&D plan for critical infrastructure to help enhance and encourage the marketplace so that we can create better innovation and brings change. So as we look at the budgets, as we look at what has happened from that landscape, we see that budgets are decreasing. We're asked to do more with less. So we have to come up with better ways to not only protect our nation's critical infrastructure, but put organizations in a position where they can respond quickly to adversarial type of attacks. So one of the things that we bring and we want to help organizations with is to better understand what their requirements are so that we can take those problem areas, right? Those requirements, those requirements always, to the most extent, identify some gap in some technology solution or some technology space, which creates a problem area, and then take R&D funds and try to invest to cover those gaps in those problem areas. So that's our role, and hopefully, you will see coming from us and through the executive order, some other work that has been done from the White House that is being pushed down, that we'll play a major role in helping push forward innovation so that we can provide the necessary technology, the necessary solutions to help deal with some of the gaps that exist that help us better prepare to defend against our adversaries.
Great, thank you. I think we'll go back to Ms. Colleen Coggins. What types of challenges and opportunities are facing the federal IT community today?
Okay. Well, first, let me just give an overview of my agency for those who are not familiar with NHTSA, which stands for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. We're a relatively small agency within the Department of Transportation, and I say small, small in number in FTE. We're only about 600 FTE, but our mission really covers and impacts the American public on a daily basis because we regulate the automotive industry, and it's our job to make sure that the vehicles that you drive are safe and meet federal standards. And so, of course, we work closely with the auto manufacturers. Our job is to spot vehicular defects sooner than later and, as necessary, issue recalls. So obviously, we deal with a lot of data from a lot of variety of sources. You've heard, all of the challenges associated with big data, securing that data, because some of that information that we collect is privacy related. For example, we collect information on any fatal crash within the United States. We collect full information, driver behavior, crash information, even EDR information from the onboard vehicular system. So our ability to call through that information and spot safety defect trends is paramount. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. We are within NHTSA implementing BI tools. We're currently leveraging the IBM Cognos suite and a lot of the analytical and trend and predictive forecasting. So, our job obviously is to leverage that technology and provide the information to our safety defect engineers so they can act, again, pretty rapidly. The second part of our mission is more on outreach. So we deal with the states. We manage about $500 million of grants annually, and we do a lot of driver behavior campaigns. You probably have heard a number of them, ticket or click it, of course, don't text while driving. And we work with the states on their outreach programs at the local level and also their enforcement. One of the opportunity areas in that space is, and it's been a focus for this administration in terms of open government, and of course followed by digital government, is releasing our data to the general public, our industry partners, and the NPO groups who are extremely interested in safety data, so they can glean from themselves, again, trends and ways that they can get the word out to their constituents as well. NHTSA is very transparent, I'm proud to say, with our data. We're very open. We have recently released 4 APIs. One of them, we collect about 40,000 vehicular complaints from the public annually. And so that is a jewel of information that our automotive partners, of course, are very interested in mining, so they can in turn address safety defects on their end. So the first, of course, generation was to release our information in machine-readable format, but now we've gone a step further by releasing that information in APIs. So our recall data is available, and what it does is spark innovation in the private sector, obviously, to leverage our information to, the private sector can develop meaningful social apps leveraging our information. We, of course, have our own version. We have a Safer Car app, which is downloadable on iTunes. We have a Droid version to follow fairly soon. But those, I think, are the opportunities that we all share in the federal space in terms of making our data more open, accessible, and useful to our constituents. I think, in the context of security on the challenge side, we definitely, I think, within the civilian agencies, we are still struggling a bit with the implementation of ICAM. And I know within transportation are definitely focused on getting our mandatory logical access numbers up. I think beyond that, though, there's a huge space in terms of PIV-enabling our legacy systems. And once, that work, the work involved with that is pretty significant because, of course, our portfolios have grown up through time, and many of them are not directory aware. So a lot of them have hard-coded pointers to local access control lists. Well, that's a challenge, but then that's, of course, an opportunity for us to work with private sector in remediating, if you will, those systems to become directory aware and PIV-enabled. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Mr. McComb, would you tell us a little bit about your mission as well as what challenges and opportunities you face today?
Recently, Air Force Materiel Command, who's our parent command, went through a reorganization where we had 11 centers that were combined into 5. The center I work for is a Life Cycle Management Center. They have 2 major aspects. One is acquisition, acquiring next generation platforms, whether they're manned or unmanned, and then product support. How do they support that platform throughout its life cycle? Taking into consideration that AFMC doesn't operate these platforms. You have the using commands, whether it's Air Mobility Command, Air Combat Command, Special Operations Command down south in Florida. And so, but these acquisitions, as the vice commander put it in a meeting I was in, you know, we're a production company. We produce contracts. And what we're trying to do right now is shorten that acquisition cycle. And so we're involved in an effort with a group called the Standards and Process Board, chaired by the vice commander, to assess 40 key processes and how they can shorten the cycle time. And some of the work that we're doing, and I'd mentioned earlier, metrics management's dashboard, and the hook to cybersecurity in there is we're trying to use products that already have the authority to operate. Their CNAs are already done at the Air Force level as an enterprise system, which alleviates that burden, that cost of doing business. But trying to use those and drill down into cycle time measures. And by tracking a baseline, you know, you can't improve what you can't track. And so my small tech team has quite a bit of work on its plate right now, including opportunity costs. You know, if we're doing a dashboard development for the senior leaders, we may not be working with a customer who wants to automate their processes. We also have increased at AFL-CMC from 20 major systems that we have to support PMs on to 180, and we think that's going to grow to about 200. About a dozen of these came over the wall with expired CNAs. And we're trying to employ, given enough time, to use the same type of process automation for our customers we need to do for ourselves in our PMs. How do you get ahead of the game? How do you start the work that you need to do in advance? There's been some discussion here about reinvigorating, I call it Phoenix, but you know, reinvigorating security across the life cycle of any system, whether it's, regardless of whether it's an operational platform or a business system. I think we've lost some of the skill and art in there. And then, as Colleen mentioned, you know, I'm real big on business intelligence, analytics, and decision support systems. And I think that's an area that we don't leverage enough to get more insight about what we're doing, what our customers are doing. And this is where, you know, the I part of IT, which is all about the information, is conducting activities for your customers that turn a benefit for them in incremental delivery. Not big bang theory, I'll get it to you in 2 years. You know, we look at 2-month delivery cycles. We're doing dashboard development, and sometimes it's with a requirements owner that can't articulate what they want. They give you an abstract picture. Literally, this is how we got into the current metrics dashboard we're doing is we sat down with the vice commander and he drew a picture. And then assigned a peer of mine as a requirements owner, and he can't bring it down in salient characteristics. So we end up writing scope and vision documents for our customer. We give it to them, they bleed all over the page, we revise it. But without having those requirements, you can't trace back to say, did I meet key performance indicators, critical success factors that you needed to deliver this so we can get out of trying to bring a rock. So, you know, using the tools that we're using for others, for ourselves, in an environment where the cybersecurity, the certification, accreditation are already done to alleviate that cost avoidance and burden. And I think, you know, the business process automation area and business process management has bridged the gap between the business side of the house and the IT delivery side of the house, because all the other stuff we do in portfolio management and CNA activities and cybersecurity is non-value added but required. Our customers still, and mission partners still say, I've got an aircraft that we have to produce and we have to deliver that to some user. And the CNA stuff is all great to hear about, but we don't care.
Thank you. Mr. Green, could you tell us a little bit about your mission and some of the challenges and opportunities that you see in your day-to-day?
So our mission is a couple of things. One is to create innovation so that we can help protect our critical infrastructure and our networks against our adversaries. Two, the innovation that we create, we want to be able to transition that innovation to operational environments. So we look for transition partners in the private industry as well as the federal space. So anything we innovate, we don't want it sitting on the shelves. We want to be able to transition that technology. And we've had a very pretty good success rate, a track record in doing that with, you know, the development of Iron Key, which was developed through our cybersecurity division, as well as some technologies that have been acquired by McAfee and Microsoft. So we really want to focus on the transition because that's what it's all about. We want to innovate, but as we innovate, we want to be able to transition the innovation to operational environments. And the third point as part of our mission is really to provide the leadership in R&D with other R&D arms within the government, like DARPA and the intelligence community, NSA, and so forth and so on. So we could come up with co-funding opportunities, leverage the requirements in the research that each of those entities may have, and then take pieces of those R&D efforts and be able to transition that technology to the operational environment as well as work with vendors and have an opportunity to take the innovation that we've created and transition some of the innovation into some of the products and services that you see on the market today. So in terms of some of the things that we see, one of the things that we see is that, there are a lot of gaps in state-of-the-art, and the state-of-the-art tools that we use today are just not where it needs to be. As we look at software is becoming more complex. We're seeing software become larger, so we have to move at the pace that software is moving. And unfortunately, the tools that we use today just can't scale that well. So, whether it's the techniques, whether it's how we test and evaluate software, so what we have to do, we have to come up with innovation to cover some of those gaps, so that we can at least provide some type of countermeasure to deal with the gaps that are not in some of the state-of-the-art tools that we use today. So a lot of what we do a lot of research. We leverage the academia community to provide, the underpinning research that can provide breakthroughs and insight into new discoveries. And those new discoveries help spur innovation. It creates better competition within the market. A lot of what we've been also focusing on is open source and trying to leverage open source technologies as well. So that, not only can you take, what you do from a commercial side, but also let's take what you do for commercial side, let's marry that with some open source and create synergies between that so we can have some type of solution that can cover a lot of different areas within the gaps that may exist in the market today.
Great, thank you. And I just want to kind of bring the conversation back to something that Mr. McComb touched on, about some of his challenges in getting customer adoption and support for some of the innovation or some of the things that might be, you guys might be kind of coming up with, and then the challenge of kind of getting that implemented across the board.
Yeah, I think my first exposure to what was Aeronautical Systems Center is when I got hired there, was having a meeting with the executive director I reported to, and he kind of put it in one small sentence: all those that came before you provided me the unfulfilled promise of IT. So he's an ex-pilot, and he's now an SES. So I don't know, that gave me one of those things that, gee, it doesn't matter where I go from here, as long as I deliver something, I'll have a step up. And then we went through some challenges. I sit as an advisor to a group called the Resource Board at the center that figures out, with limited dollars, am I going to spend money on an information technology asset, hiring somebody else, modernizing a building. And it seemed like the briefings that took place there and people were coming in to grovel for money was, the more exquisite your briefing was, the better opportunity you had to get the dollar. And so I told Mr. May, I said, we're going to put a portfolio management process in place. He started laughing. He said, good luck, and that's what we've done. So we benchmark our portfolio as best we can, but understand, I don't have a budget. So I'm an advisor to others that control their budget, whether it's a functional office, FM or D, or financial community or the contracting community. The PEOs in the Air Force get their dollars a different way. So you have to show them a value. And the value that we try to provide out there is using standard systems so that when a human being goes from one office to one program to another program, they're not worried about using a different set of tools and technologies. They have a standard approach. And where we became really successful, as I stated earlier, was doing the process automation work. This mattered. If you can help a program office save 20 minutes a day out of a person's time from doing data entry and extraction into analytic forecasting and trending, trying to figure out if their program's on direction or if it's going to become a nice congressional target where people get to go to DC and visit with a bunch of congressional members in a very open forum. They want to get in front of what they're trying to do. In not having investment dollars constrains us to some point. In having a large center that has a lot of engineering, a lot of brilliant people, constrains you because you have a lot of great ideas come out there, but when the day is done, which ones are going to be the priorities, which ones are going to drive efficiency gains, and Colleen was talking about business intelligence and analytics. So when we're doing dashboard development, which is a nice presentation layer out there that allows the consumer, the three-star, the vice commander, to look at status the way they want to look at it, whether it's a graph or pie chart or a histogram, it's also ability to drill back into where's the source of that information and data, and how can we get to the point where we're doing management by exception? If your program's on target, your investment's on target, it's green, do I really care? If it's yellow, there's some concerns. Yes, we use stoplight charts. If it's red, it needs critical help. If it's blue, which those things that are ahead of schedule and under cost, we usually want to assess them to say, if you're doing so well, why isn't everybody else? So that's the type of value we try to bring in. And with the three-star general we work for, General Moore is very acute that when he has meetings and reviews, you've got to be on your game because he's going to ask probing questions. And so he expects you to have all the insight necessary to respond to his question. He's pushing the center hard. We've got more work than we can handle. I think most of you know that last Friday I spent handing out furlough notices to my staff, including the tech team, the same guys that have been in this metal and producing stuff. It's the day after that I'm concerned about. Innovation is great, but it's all about people doing some good work.
Thank you. Now, Colleen, in your world, are there some challenges that you have to overcome for customer support, or would it be kind of more along the lines of selecting your service provider and challenges along that front?
Well, we're grappling with both fronts, if you will. So on the services that we provide to our internal customers, our program areas, as the CIO, it's my job to support them in any of their business needs and to leverage IT to the most effective means necessary to execute our mission. So that varies. We, for example, just had new legislation enacted, MAP 21, that affects not only my agency, NHTSA, but federal highways. And so those are business rules that we have to adapt to. Some of it are affecting our grants management system. We also have a major effort underway. Again, we're a data-driven organization. So we capture a lot of data nationally, and as the demographics of the nations change, our sampling sites, of course, change. So we want to make sure that we capture statistically relevant information across the United States, different urban, rural communities, suburban, and different demographics, of course, in terms of age and race and so forth. And so we have to be flexible. We need a flexible architecture. We need to employ our regional and our field staff with mobile devices and with the information where they can get this data out in whatever crash site or field condition they're in, and quickly transport that back into our home office and reduce the time from data capture to providing that information to our analysts and our statisticians for examination. So that's just an example of the things that we do to service our internal customers. But we, again, are obviously not an island unto our own. Our forte is obviously not financial management, HR, any of the back office systems. So we care and we are customers and we to other service providers. For example, we receive our payroll and personnel services from Department of Interior, National Business Center, financial management from the FAA. And I think it's interesting, Danny Werfel, his recent memo with basically a renewed call for shared services in the financial management sector was really, I think, hard-hitting in terms of having those shared service providers really take a good look at not only the services they're providing, but ensuring that they have integrated suites with the subsidiary functions that feed into the financial management, such as travel, procurement, payroll. And so we not only care about, obviously, the services we're receiving, but we want to make sure that those systems that we're using are integrated. And I think that still remains to be a challenge within that space. I'm not sure how many of you guys are grappling with that, but disjointed, disconnected, mixed financial systems, and we want to move towards an integrated suite of systems. So we definitely care about the services we're receiving. I think it's an area, frankly, that transparency can be improved. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to go on even a secure site to, as a federal customer, to look at all of the service providers in the space and just to gauge and rate them across a standard set of metrics that they're all reporting on, including, customer satisfaction. So I understand Max, there's a repository for what service providers exist out there. That's a good start, but we also care in terms of performance metrics, how they're doing.
Mr. Green, what are some of the challenges that you have to overcome for customer adoption, particularly with new innovations that might come out of the research and development in your work?
Well, there's a couple of things that I could. That's a very good question. There's a couple of things I could think of. One is lack of standards, and the second is lack of workforce. Right. So, in terms of trying to identify transition partners, one of the things is there is a lack of standards. Right. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. So let's say I have 5 static analysis tools. Right. Chances are that none of the 5 vendors output their tool to a common format. So each tool vendor produces a different output, right? So, there is standards out there that, that was developed by MITRE that called SAFES. SAFES is a format that vendors can use to output their tools to. So one of the things is lack of standards. So we've seen a lot of times people don't adopt a lot of the innovation because there's no standards to help govern how that technology is supposed to be implemented within their environment. Then also the policy that a lot of times, we constantly, have a gap between, creating standards and policies, and we're kind of always chasing, and policies are not evolving fast. Standards and policies are not evolving fast enough to keep pace with the change of technology, right? The other is workforce. A lot of times you go into environments, you do outreach, and you talk to CISOs, and we really like the technology, but we just don't have the resources to bring it in, right? Because a lot of times new innovation requires someone to learn something new. So I can't take Johnny away from his day-to-day work because he's probably one of our best analysts who can do threat management, for example, right? So resources is the issue. How do you replenish the workforce, right? I know yesterday there was a panel discussion on the whole education workforce with cybersecurity, and we're seeing that there is a very lack of talent in terms of the workforce for cybersecurity professionals. We even see some programs are looking to go into schools to start training elementary students how to focus in with STEM projects and cybersecurity, introduce cybersecurity to them at an early age. Also, there's also talk about going in and retraining the workforce, right? So let's say the English, the student or the teacher who went and took English as a major in college. I'm just giving an example. She has an opportunity to go back into the workforce to learn cybersecurity. So there's a couple of things that I think is for me are barriers for getting transition into organizations. And then the other thing that I could think of off the top is that we just don't change fast enough, right? We constantly dealing with the here and now, and we seldom take the time to think about where we need to be from a cybersecurity perspective, because we're so focused on we have our heads in the weeds trying to figure out how do we extinguish this fire that's going on right now, as opposed to let's think about planning ahead for cybersecurity. Because the thing we need to keep in mind, that our adversaries are already thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of us. We're still reactionary in not only of our technologies, but the implementation and strategies that governs our technology. So I think, changing our mindset to be more proactive and being more forward thinking, I think that will help, and with at least accepting and embracing some of the innovation that the R&D community is trying to present and transition to the operational environments.
Right, and certainly with the kind of the concept of keeping things or making things more effective and more efficient because of the lack of workforce or the lack of budgetary, kind of bringing things back to Mr. McComb, what kind of level of efficiency gain or better knowledge and awareness have you been able to achieve through use of some of the technologies that you've implemented?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, some of the work we've done, some of the weapon system programs. One particular effort was to track variances against baseline. That saved about 20 minutes a day for the people on this program and allowed the program manager to better report to constituents, external stakeholders, how they were getting this particular program back on track and remediate some deficiencies. I talked about the civil engineering system that we did for the CE community that allowed them to turn contracts around quicker, which helped, get the facilities built faster and the inspections done. The dashboard work, when you think about management dashboards, the orientation for us really is more at the executive level. The executives are more concerned about what's going on. It's always questionable whether the PM sees a utility in a metrics management dashboard until they're in a review with the senior leader, and the senior leader's asking why their particular asset is yellow. Why is your investment not doing so well? And lo and behold, they seem to become more efficient in improving what they're doing. The CNA, there was one learning objective here about unfunded mandates. The reporting burden on everybody in this room, I don't care if you're in a university or in a NASCIO or the federal government or the private sector, the reporting burden is incredible. It's incredible, and it's an opportunity cost. You're reporting on things you're trying to work on to make them better. And our reporting has increased with a decrease in staff and a decrease in dollars. In the Air Force, we report to numerous masters. I mean, sometimes, I don't know if you look at a contemporary CIO office where you go, okay, within that I've got, a CISO, and they do business process reengineering, and they're managing the investments. At the air staff level, we report to at least 3 major masters. That sometimes, not trying to speak out of school, I don't know if they ever get together and have a cup of coffee, but the level of reporting that we're doing today is a factor of 5 greater than it was 2 years ago. And we're trying to figure out, Colleen and I were talking before we started, we have this information in various places. How can we use the technology that we have to get ahead of this game? Or can we? There are some things we will never get ahead of. I don't know if it was Mark Noble, somebody mentioned Patch Tuesday, I think yesterday. The Category 1 vulnerabilities coming out of the OEM software houses that we use are ridiculous. And I'm not going to berate any particular company. They're ridiculous. And what it causes us is wholesale testing and patch releases that always impact the infrastructure and always breathe in latency until people's clients are up to date. And there can be a lot better work done in testing software. I've got one guy on my team that does unique software testing. So the Air Force has a group that will test out and put on an Air Force approved product list, enterprise-wide software. But let's say you're working for an engineering outfit. This is the first one we got hit with. We need a fluid dynamic software product. We need to be able to test airframes and different, simulate it in different operational zones. This could be a sub in water, but in our case, we had to test that software, all its controls, pass that report on to the approving agency, and then wait 3 months. for them just to have somebody sign off on it. But this has become a hotbed of work. And so we go through a pretty meticulous level of effort in software testing, which used to be a real art, not only in the Fed and in the private sector, but some of the major products that we use, that you use at home, that we use at work, it's always the top three. And we're always explaining to the senior leaders that we can't really correct this problem, but we could partner with the private sector, the software houses, better to overcome it. And I bring this up because that's another level of reporting. Somehow I was benevolently handed metrics owners for both Category 1 vulnerabilities, and then we track unauthorized devices being plugged into the Air Force network, which, you know, the outcome for people, it's not always pleasant. You get one strike, you don't get two. And so we're trying to find mechanisms to use the technologies we have to try to help answer the mail when we have to, and spend more time on the job doing the work that we're having, you know, that we really need to do for our customers and clients.
Can I add to that, please? Yeah. So one of the things that I think is very important when we start talking dashboards and we start talking continuous monitoring, and continuous monitoring means different things to different people. But I think, you know, as you know, one of the things we have to do is develop better analytics around our data, right? So we can build the situational awareness so that, you know, we have a way to prioritize those critical vulnerabilities, right? Not only do we have a way to prioritize them, we have a way to provide countermeasures, right? Because everything you can't mitigate, you know, on day one. I mean, it may take, you know, as he mentioned, 3 months to find a workable solution to fix or remediate something. So we have to have countermeasures in place. But I think it's really important that, you know, we collect so much information, but we know nothing about the information we collect because there's no analytics around the data we collect. Not only there's no analytics around the data we collect, there's no situational awareness, right? Being able to understand how this data matters, right? Not only how it matters, but what is it telling me about my environment, right? So, you know, being able to establish that baseline so that when things do come up and as we collect data, you know, because we're constantly collecting data every day, build that baseline in so every time we collect data and things changes, we have the analytics to show us the diffs, the changes in the baseline so we can act more accordingly and be more effective in how we react to some things that we see like attacks or zero-day vulnerabilities that have come in a while. We'd be in better position to respond.
Now, kind of along that lines, what are some of the things that you're doing today to respond to kind of those zero-day threats or zero-day incidents that you might be, you know, having to deal with? Yeah, Kevin, Mr. Green, sorry.
Well, I mean, 0 day is one of the things. I mean, you stuck between a rock and a hard place. So, one of the things I think is very important. It all starts with software assurance, right? Because as vulnerabilities come up in software, initially it started from a weakness that could have been identified in software. Most federal organizations, not only federal organizations, but most organizations that have some role in our critical infrastructure do not have a formal software assurance program, which is unbelievable. Not only do they don't have a formal software assurance program, they are not integrating security aspects within the software development process. So until we address that issue, until we teach, and it's really about, we can talk technology all we want, but it's really about security awareness and education, teaching developers how to develop good code, right? How to engineer good code, but also being able to have something that you can fall back on in the event that someone develops something for you that does not meet your requirements. Now, tying security requirements into the procurement process is very important. So as third-party developable software for me, there is language in the contract that stipulates security has to be embedded within the development process. And being able to have a formal process that we can adopt to measure whether or not security is being developed throughout the SDLC. I think that's important. And if we can stop some of that, or at least, a lot of, Ron Ross talked about supply chain management the other day. So, software supply chain management is another thing. How do you ensure software is trustworthy? We accept software all the time into our environments and have no idea whether or not properties are in place to ensure trustworthiness. We have no idea. So how do we get to a point where we can ensure that software is trustworthy? We have to stand up software assurance programs that are designed to do that. And if we can better do that, I think we'd be in a better place to not only reduce vulnerabilities before they even come into our environment, but be in a better place to respond. And now, instead of trying to patch tons of vulnerabilities, a lot of times we patch vulnerabilities, we don't even realize what vulnerabilities are the most critical to our organization. So we're patching unnecessary vulnerabilities. I'm not saying patching is not important, but I don't believe patching at 100% is attainable for most organizations. So you have to prioritize what vulnerabilities are really critical to your organization. And that's the situational awareness I was talking about that we have to be able to understand. So as we move closer and think forward, and hopefully through some of the things that we're doing through innovation, if we can provide organizations better solutions, at least for my program with software assurance, being able to create tools and techniques to help developers develop good code. We have something that we're developing now. It's a 5-year effort. It was part of our broad agency announcement that we just awarded in September of 2012. It's called the Software Assurance Marketplace. It's a huge collaborative research environment. It's being developed out of Wisconsin by Mortgage Institute for Research. So what they're essentially developing is a collaborative environment where we can improve software development activities. There's a place for the software developer. I have code that I wrote that I could come and test and evaluate. I'm a tool developer. I want to improve my tool. There's a way for you to go and improve your tool as well. Not only that, I have software that I acquired from somewhere. So I could go in and run binary analysis against my software. And not only that, we'll create the whole compliance validation framework. So when you do submit code and you get your report back, now you can give it to your auditor and say, hey, Mr. Auditor, I have my software evaluated. It meets our security requirements. So you don't have to go through another process with the whole certification accreditation process.
Now, Colleen, can you share some of your security challenges or some maybe zero-day activities that you may have had to address?
Well, let me change the context a little slightly to security with relation to cloud services. So we have a presence we have a footprint at a public cloud provider. And of course, like many of you, we purchase our security services, managed services through that cloud provider. However, I really believe in the philosophy of trust but verify. And so even though we do have dashboard information, statistics into attempted access, attempted attacks through the IDS and IPS systems that they deploy, one of the things that we've been successful in doing is negotiating a pretty unique situation, I think, to give more of an IVMV view on the security services that we're receiving from our cloud vendor. And what we've negotiated essentially is to install our own GFE monitoring equipment, layer 3 network and above. So we are receiving our information through our GFE to our subnet, our data net, of course, strictly our data systems. We have PII leak monitoring capabilities that we have installed, and we have comparative information between what we're receiving from our cloud vendor, but we're doing an IVMV overlook, if you will, from our GFE environment. It's, I think, a unique situation that, like I said, was negotiated. It's really proving pretty beneficial to us. And the more it's discussed within our department, I think it's a model that others are looking to pursue as well. So just in terms of the IVMV assurance of services, which again, you know, how can you, we trust the cloud vendor, but again, back to the philosophy of trust but verify, we're deploying that methodology and that concept within NHTSA.
Now, just quick jumping back to Mr. Green, could you add some comments on why you think continuous monitoring is becoming more important in organizations today?
Well, continuous monitoring, okay, from my perspective, it's becoming important because a couple of things. One, I think people have less resources to spend on monitoring, right? So we have to come up with sophisticated ways to automate as much of the monitoring as possible. But one of the things that I would like to see happen and evolve with continuous monitoring is typically continuous monitoring really focuses on endpoints, you know, the desktop, the workstation, the server, the OS, the network layer. But how do we bring application context to the continuous monitoring process? I think that's very important. Because not only does application security attack vectors give you direct access to data through injection attacks and so forth and so on, we have to do a better job at developing and writing better code to secure our applications. So one of the things that I have as a new start for a research project that I'm trying to get funded, which can't really talk in detail about it, is taking a continuous monitoring framework, bring application context to that framework. So not only do we have the network and the host layer alerts, but we also have the application alerts. Now let's start to make associations between network layer attacks and application attacks. Because a lot of times we have those two data types completely disassociated in our environments. But they're interrelated. So how do you develop the synergies around the data types to better understand, okay, if I see something at the network layer, what does that mean at the application layer? If I see something at the application layer, what does that mean at the network layer? We have to make, and that's the whole analytics that I was talking about earlier. For continuous monitoring to be successful, in my opinion, it not only has to take care of the network layer, but also have to have some aspect of application security context. Because a lot of times, port 80 and 443 is wide open, of course. And most folks don't do reverse proxy, so they don't break SSL to really inspect SSL. So how do we really understand what our threats are in our attack vector? And what is the actual attack surface that we're dealing with here? And how bad is it? So I think for continuous monitoring to evolve, we need to incorporate those type of strategies into the process, into the framework.
Can I add a little bit to that? The theme here, I've heard from Kevin and Craig that we're all dealing with in terms of, less money, more responsibilities in terms of execution, and of course add to that sequestration. And the threats are, increasingly growing, obviously. So looking for strategies within the realm of IT to save money. Of course, over the last decade, we've all, moved to virtualizing our servers and our systems, more shared services. One of the things that we're also doing within NHTSA and DOT, our goal is to save about 10% a year in desktop hardware and desktop support services, and of course, reposition that money where it's most needed, including in the security realm. We're implementing what we call personas, and so rather than every employee getting the same outfit of a laptop, a BlackBerry, or an iPhone, or what have you, we are coming up with a handful of personas based on who works in the field, what is your job function, are you an information producer, where you may need, as an engineer, a more powerful laptop in terms of processing capability, or if you're a consumer, you're an executive, you're doing light editing, and so you can basically get away with a VDI footprint or an iPad. And so what we're looking at is the distribution of devices, not necessarily to reduce the total number, although we think that's going to be an output, but to maintain the same level of productivity, but give our folks the devices that they need to do their job. Because what we're finding is many of these devices are very underutilized, and you know, the dollar per user, we can definitely reduce that significantly by looking and categorizing our folks into these personas. So we just presented that to our investment review board. Our next step is to actually map our FTE to these personas and to roll this out over the next year or two. And so I think that's one of the ways, well, at least within NHTSA, that's one of the ways that we're trying to reduce our IT costs at the desktop level.
Thank you. And I'd just like to close up here with Mr. McComb giving us his thoughts on continuous monitoring and its applications.
You know, I'll be honest, I'd probably rather hear a question from the audience. We're trying to get our hands around the Air Force, what that really means in cycle time and monitoring. Everything I'm doing right now is just trying to deal with a huge portfolio increase and a lot of CNA work that we have to get done by the end of August to report back to the Air Staff. I think Kevin touched on it. A lot of what we're doing right now, especially with Category 1 vulnerabilities or zero-day, is playing catch-up. And the way it operates in the Air Force is, you know, we have business rules called Air Force instructions. Until they're issued, we deal with what we used to do and how we used to do it. And I think some of the technologies I've seen at some of the show and some of the exchanges with others, and the ability to triangulate different data sources to really figure out what's going on, not only in the network, but your software assets that reside in the network and the human influence. I think that's all got to roll into it.
Great. Thank you.